Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar on non-dilutive funding for non-US organization. My name is Shira Aroni. I'm a Director of Business Development at the FreeMind Group, and I'm pleased to be presenting in front of you today. The slide deck is available for immediate download in the webinar slide bar under the handout section, and I will be also emailing it following the presentation. It will be available on our website for your convenience. At the end of today's webinar, you should have time for Q&A. You're also welcome to call me or email me directly with questions specifically to your situation or science. My contact information will be available on the last slide of today's presentation. Okay, so let's start. So let's start with a short introduction of the FreeMind Group. FreeMind Group is a consulting firm specializing in non-dilutive funding. Actually, we are the global leader in non-dilutive funding. We are in the business for 18 years, since 1999. We are 60 full-time employees. We work across the life sciences, academics, research institutes, universities, medical centers, and industry, from small startups all the way up to big pharmaceutical companies. And we submit over 500 applications every year. Last year, we won over $100 million on behalf of our clients. And that's a great deal of experience, knowledge, expertise, which we put together to increase your chances of winning an award and to help achieve the largest non-dilutive funding possible. Well, so how do we do that? Basically, we start by identifying the most relevant funding opportunities. Our main objective is to help our clients to get as much money as possible, like I said, and by identifying the relevant opportunities, we start this approach. We conduct a very systematic and strategic approach towards non-dilutive funding. And the first step of identifying the most relevant funding opportunities is a very important step. If you have a great science but apply for a grant that's not relevant to your science or use the incorrect mechanism, you will not be successful, despite the fact that your science is really the best. Our analysts then create a list of opportunities, which we build. Actually, we translate that list for a multi-submission granting strategy to maximize your chances to win at least one award. We manage the complex projects production process and lead a joint application writing process. Of course, we cannot do this alone. While we certainly lead the process, we do need you on board. We do need you involved in this joint effort, since you are the experts in your science. And of course, when relevant, we support final contract negotiations. So basically, this is us, and I want to present a little bit the non-dilutive funding field. So basically, I want to point out that non-dilutive funding has not just has the value of the actual dollar you receive. This is the most strict scientific review process in the world. So if you win an NIH award, suddenly investors are coming to you. According to a study done by the Milken Institute in 2012, for every $1 received from non-dilutive sources, you will attract over $8 in the private sector. Another interesting fact they found is that, historically speaking, 50% of all FDA-approved drugs have been funded by the NIH, sometimes during their development. This figure shows that if you are able to win non-dilutive funding, your drug has a better chance of succeeding. This is an important thing to keep in mind as you move forward with investments and funding strategies and trying to successfully develop new drugs and get your company going. So, of course, non-dilutive funding is not the only source of funding, and to build a strong company, you shouldn't rely solely on non-dilutive sources. You should have a diverse investment portfolio and be able to bring money from different sources. Approach angels, VCs, family office, etc. But at the same time, keep strategically seeking non-dilutive sources to accommodate different aspects of your R&D needs. So one doesn't often think about the cost of raising money, but you can see here the average cost of raising money from private sector per year is between $60,000 and $120,000, and an investment of about 600 hours over the year going to different events, presentations, and seeking interest by investors. And of course, there is the cost of the equity. Consider now the average cost of a non-dilutive campaign. Let's say you submit 3 to 5 applications submitted over the course of the year, yielding the same amount of money, but costing you only between $3,000 or $50,000 if you hire outside assistance, and only about 300 hours of your time. And of course, there is no equity, completely non-dilutive. Okay, so now I want to present the US sources. The main one is the NIH. So under the Health and the Human Services, which is the HHS, the main source is the NIH, the National Institutes of Health. There are 27 institutes and centers covering basically every type of indications and population and every aspect of health science, including different branches of health and platforms. You can see here, for example, the NCI Institute, the NCI, which is the National Cancer Institute. For example, the NINDS, National Institute for Neurological Diseases and Stroke, and so on. So there are basically these institutes cover basically every field in the life sciences. Other sources within the HHS include BARDA, FDA, which will be discussed later on. The Department of Defense is another main source of funding from the government throughout different specific mechanisms and programs. Of course, there are also private foundations such as Gates, Michael J. Fox, and many more. So, like I said, I didn't, but the total pocket of money we're looking on is $50 billion annually from all the sources I mentioned. But it's important to say that the largest source within these sources is the NIH, with $34 billion annually for 2017. While the vast majority of the NIH budget, $28 billion, is devoted for extramural research down outside the NIH itself, such as research project grants and R&D contracts. So this is the categorical spending of the NIH for 2017. You can see that the indications are listed here with their budget. You have hot topics like clinical research, genetics, cancer, neuroscience with $6 billion a year, infectious diseases also with $4 billion. But more importantly, this list includes almost every indication possible in the life sciences field. And this is the NIH only, so you can be definitely sure that you will find funding for your research no matter which indication it is. Looking at the full development path, the NIH covers R&D activities anywhere from discovery stage through preclinical activities, IND-enabling studies, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and then of course it lessens when it gets to licensing and commercialization. What I hope you take from this slide is that each stage of development is reflected by different solicitations and mechanisms. So there are mechanisms such as the R21, R1, which we'll discuss later, and the funding is between $200,000 for early stage projects to $3.5 or $4 or $5 million for clinical stage projects. And this is in the NIH only. Of course, there are other mechanisms and sources that their awards are much bigger, such as BARDA, for example, and we will speak about it later on. Okay, so now after I presented to you the sources and the funding in general, let's speak about non-US awardees. So foreign 2016 statistics show that currently there are 1,191 awards being paid to non-US applicants organizations, which is totaling in $1.3 billion annually. And to be more exact, 30% of the FreeMind submissions are for non-US applicants organization. So if you are a non-US company, you have a chance to win as a US company. The chances of the awards reflect science, and this is the most important thing to remember. The chances for the award reflect science and not geography. So basically, top science wins. So you are reviewed for your scientific merit and not for your location. As you can see here in the map, basically you have non-US awardees all over the world. Most of them are from Canada. You have a lot of Europe, also Israel, Africa, South Africa, so basically everywhere. And that shows that, again, it's not a geographical question, it's a scientific question. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with the European sources of funding, and I just want to point out some differences. So most solicitations accept applications, US solicitations accept applications from foreign entities, including for-profit and not just academics. Unlike Europeans' mechanisms and sources, there are no matching funds, no royalty payments, no need for consortium, which happens a lot in Europe. And basically, you have two main mechanisms, which we'll discuss later. But 60 to 70% of the solicitations are actually unsolicited mechanism, which is called also the investigator initiated, where you just go and pitch your idea in front of the NIH or the other agency, and there are no specific calls. Moreover, you get 108% of the award, and the extra 8% is for the overhead costs. And again, they are science-centered. It's not a geographical or political question. So when you do submit your application, there are a couple of differences, but the main one, we just went over a few, but the main one is that you need to provide a foreign justification to explain why a non-US applicant should be awarded a US grant. Now, we have done this many times, and if the science is favorably reviewed, the review board rarely have any issues with the foreign justification. It's not a major hurdle. And if you look at the guidelines for the foreign justifications, you can see that they are looking for projects that present special opportunities for furthering research programs throughout the use of annual talent, resources, etc. Augmenting existing US resources. So it may not need to be completely novel, but rather something that adds to existing US sources. Of course, it needs to have a specific relevance to the funding agency and to advancing the health sciences in the United States. A question that we get a lot is why? Why would the United States want to fund non-US organizations? Well, if you look at the NIH's mission, They are looking to seek fundamental knowledge about the nature and behavior of living systems and the application of that knowledge to enhance health, lengthen life, and reduce illness and disability. If the best solution is abroad, then you have as much chance as anyone. They are funding the best science and trying to address unmet medical needs. So they take this $34 billion and feed it to academics and industry and whoever qualifies in order to try and lower the healthcare burden. In 2016, the U.S. healthcare burden was $3 trillion, and it's expected to go up to $4.5 trillion by 2018. And that's a lot of money. So their goal here is to address unmet medical needs, and by doing that, lower the healthcare burden. So now let's talk about submission types. Basically, there are three different routes for funding. So the first one is solicited applications, where you address a specific area of interest. These solicitations are just like the calls in Europe. The second route is the unsolicited, which is also called the investigator initiated. Then there you try to establish interest prior to submitting. You go and you pitch in front of, for example, the NIH, and they are decide if they are interested to fund your project. And the third mechanism, the route, is the BAA, Broad Agency Announcement. Usually there will be more broad description of what the agency is looking for. For example, BARDA has this for influenza. So it's anything related to influenza, but not specific solicitation. So let's start with the NIH, the National Institutes of Health. I just ran a check today, and I saw that there are 1,212 solicitations in the NIH right now. So like I said, the first route is solicitations. There are hundreds of solicitations out there, and you can find your own solicitation that could fit your science. Second route, like I said, is the omnibus solicitation, the parent announcements. Basically, there are two mechanisms for these parents' announcement. The R21, which is the NIH Exploratory Developmental Research Grant Project. Its award is about $275,000, direct cost up to 2 years. And R1, which is the research project grant, with award of $500 direct cost per year up to 5 years, which is $2.5 million award. So the R21 is basically for very early stage project. They support early and conceptual stages of projects. These studies may involve considerable risk, but may lead to a breakthrough in a particular area. So basically, this is the award. As you can see, many institutes within the NIH participate in this award, such as NIA, NIDA, many of them. The deadline is February 16th, and there are basically 3 deadlines throughout the year: February, June, October. The next one is in February. The second solicitation is the R1. The R1 is for late stage, basically clinical stage projects, but not necessarily. The proposed project must be related to the programmatic interest of one or more of the participating NIH institutes. And here also, as you can see, there are many institutes that participate in this award. Again, 3 rolling deadlines, February, June, and October, and the next deadline is in February 5th. So let's take a moment to look at the NIH review process. Putting it simply, in reviewing and considering whether to fund your applications, the reviewers are looking at the strength and the risk of your application. The reviewers are looking basically at 5 main things. The first one is the significance of your research to the public health. They'll see if it's innovative and will make a change. Also, do you have the right environment to support the work you propose, the right lab, the right instruments for the research. Also, do you have the right leadership and team in place to successfully lead such a project? Looking at the PI, they want to make sure that the PI has the right expertise, knowledge, experience to manage this. But overall, the most important aspect they're looking at is the research approach, your scientific approach. They are looking at your milestones, your specific goals, and like I said, ultimately, top science win awards. The second source is BARDA, which I mentioned a few times earlier. BARDA is the Biomedical Advanced Research Development Authority. And the mission of BARDA is to develop, procure medical countermeasures that address chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear accidents, such as pandemic influenza and emergency infectious diseases. Basically, anything that can hurt America, they want to develop therapeutics and countermeasures and have quite a large budget to do so. As you can see, the budget as for today is $920 million, which is quite a lot. And they claim to bridge the infamous valley of death, as I'm sure you heard of, by taking phase 1 completed projects that have shown, of course, solid preclinical data and have good safety profiles, and move them forward again in the areas of CBRN, influenza, and emerging infectious diseases. So basically here you can see 3 examples of BARDA solicitations. And while these particular 3, so 3 of them. So the first one is, like I said, CBRN, for chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear medical countermeasures. The second one is for pandemic influenza, and also the third one is for infectious diseases. So the process here is a bit different from the NIH submission. Basically, it is divided into 2. Stage 1 is the white paper. White paper, also called the pre-application, is the first submission and one of the most crucial steps for the award. Typically, the white paper is about 5 to 10 pages, and majority of the applications do not make it past the white paper stage. And that means that if you are called to submit the full application, your chances increase dramatically. So after the BARDA reviewers review your white paper, you are invited, if you are invited, hopefully you will, you are invited to submit the full application. It will get reviewed by the BARDA reviewers, and then they will decide if they want to give you the money as a award. So carefully craft your white paper, ensuring your science is well presented and represented and meets the guidelines and specifications of the solicitation. So I have 2 examples here. The first one for BARDA awardees. The first one is an Israeli company, Atox Bio, who won $24 million BARDA award in 2014 for flesh-eating bacteria treatment. Another example I have is Polynovo, which is an Australian company. They submitted, of course, with us a pre-application in the middle of 2013. And then, of course, they were asked to submit a full application, and they won the full application. They won a $29 million BARDA award in 2015, a year and a half later. And like you can see here, they had a burn treatment, and right after they won the award, what happened is that their share price increased in about 300%, which was crazy. So they got the award, the share price increased dramatically, and it was a very good experience for PolyNovo. I can tell you that. So another agency, big one, is the Department of Defense, the DoD. Under the Department of Defense, there are multiple agencies. The first one is DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. A very interesting agency, I would say. Not only life science, they cover not only life science, they look for multidisciplinary approaches to advanced technology. Basically, they look at project with only about 2% chance to being successful. So very extreme, very interesting agency. Another one is DTRA, Defense Threat Reduction Agency. They focus on safeguarding the US and its allies from weapons and mass destruction, whether bugs or chemical warfare. And the third one is US Army, USAMRIC, which is the US Army Medical Research and Material Command. Through the US Army, there are different funding sources and mechanisms available to support different aspects of R&D that may or may not be relevant for military use, such as wound healing, pain management, traumatic brain injury, TBI, and other such field of research that relate to soldiers. So one program in the Department of Defense and the DoD is the CDMRP, the Congressionally Directed Medical Research Program. And I think it's the most interesting mechanisms under the DoD. They are not looking for specific military use research, but rather fund research that relates to veterans and their family. Basically, these programs comes out once a year in the springtime, usually around April, May. And as you can see here, its budget for 2017 was $968.7 million, and they have a lot of different indications, as you can see here. For example, they cover cancer. Breast cancer budget was $120 million just for 2017. Prostate cancer, spinal cord injury, vision, Alzheimer, Parkinson's. So they basically covers a lot of indications in the life sciences, and their awards are quite big. As you can see, their budget is very nice. Here you can see some indications that they cover: diabetes, Fragile X, influenza, malaria, women's heart disease. You can basically find a lot of topics here. And again, the application budgets are not capped, however, must reflect the scope of work. Of course, for preclinical stage, they will give less money than late clinical stage. Here is an example of a specific program, which is the Breast Cancer Research Program. And this solicitation is called Breakthrough Award Levels 3 and 4. And as you can see, Level 3 is for advanced translation studies that have potential for near-term clinical investigation. Its budget is $4 million with plus indirect costs. And also they are funding Level 4, large-scale project that will transform clinical management in the near future. And here it's also the award is $10 million plus indirect costs. Like I said, these programs is issued usually in the springtime, so we'll just have to wait and see. And every year the indications are different, but they usually keep the same indications funded. Okay, last but not last, or the opposite, last but not least, is the FDA. The FDA has one program for clinical studies of safety and effectiveness of orphan products research project grant. The funding is up to $2 million, and it's for specifically for rare diseases and conditions. Like I said, orphan products. They fund clinical stages, phase 1, 2, and 3, and that the deadline is February 7, 2018. So if we look at the non-dilutive funding again, it must be looked as a strategic tool. As you probably know, there are few main sources of funding: angels, public markets, VCs, and one of them is non-dilutive funding. We'll look at the non-dilutive funding as a very important strategic source among the others that will help you maximize the company's funding potential. And how do we do that? How can you maximize your chances for award? So first of all, you should seek insight into the interests and goals of the funding agencies. Then correlate the granting strategy with your long-term R&D plan. You'll have to see what they are looking for, and try to see if your science answers their requirements, answers their solicitations. Then identify all relevant funding opportunities, and most importantly, plan and execute a long-term multi-submission granting strategy. That's mean plan to yourself a list of funding opportunities and see how many applications you can submit throughout the year. Try to create a multi-submission granting strategy, and we learned that that's the best thing to do in order to maximize your chances for award. Then, next step, after you conducted the strategic assessment and identified all of the relevant opportunities, the next step is to write the applications for each one of the agencies. It is important to know your weaknesses. If there is a field in your research you feel uncomfortable with, don't hesitate to ask for aid from another organization who experts in that field, or collaborate with it. Find the right partner. The NIH welcomes collaborations from all kinds, but of course they are not mandatory. Know the interest of the agencies and adjust your application respectively. Address non-important admin parts which are important. You don't want to work on an application for a few months or weeks and find out after the submission that you are not eligible to apply for this one. Or if you are planning to submit a one-site application, a one-site for clinical trials application, and then you'll submit and find that it was a multi-site clinical trials application. So it's really important to look at the non-important admin parts. And last but not least, establish yourself both as a top researcher as well as an experienced manager. So, and how do we do that in FreeMind? So we help you maximize your funding potential through 3 services. The first one is identify all relevant funding opportunities. Our client strategists get an understanding of your pipeline, your goals, your funding needs. Then they will lay out all of the opportunities that are out there and can potentially fit your needs. Then we'll create a multi-submission granting strategy and submit as many top quality applications as possible. We help our clients to write the applications in a joint effort. It's a ping-pong back and forth process, and after we feel the application is perfect, it is submitted. So thank you so much for attending the webinar today. I guess it's perfect time for questions. So let's see what we've got. see. Okay, so I can see here that most of the questions are specifics for your science. Oh, here I can see one on here. How long does it take to create an application? So basically, it changes from mechanism to mechanism and agency to agency, but over the board, it takes about 6 to 8 weeks to produce an application. And before that, of course, we do the strategic assessment process to see what opportunities you have out there. So basically, if you are planning to submit and to meet the next deadline, which is February, you should start working on the applications right away in order to do it in the best way there is, and see if you can submit more than just one application or meet several deadlines in February. So I guess now it would be the perfect time. Let's see what we got here. Oh, here I see a question. What submission type would you consider awards from CARBEX to be? So the submission type, the CARBEX is another agency under BARDA for antibiotics resistance. And the submission type would be the white paper, the pre-application, and the full application. I guess the rest of the questions are specific to your science. So I think we should end this now. So to learn more about the FreeMind group, you can visit our website and watch, past webinars. Also, you're welcome to follow us on our Twitter and YouTube as well as LinkedIn group. Also, I'll send you a link right away in the chat box for our next webinar. It will be on Wednesday, December 6th, on the topic of medical device non-dilutive funding trends and opportunities. For more information and to register, you can click the link. I'll put it right away. And I will send these slides as a PDF. Oh, also you have the PDF here in the handouts. I'll send you everything tomorrow. And thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure. And I hope to see you soon in our next webinar. Thank you so much.